So I am a retired Air Force officer. I spent my career largely in the Air Force doing government procurement as a contracting officer. Everything from desks and chairs to major weapon systems. I worked in Sacramento at the Air Logistics Center, buying spare parts for aircraft that are being repaired and everything that was needed on the base to make the base operate and function. My staff and I oversaw everything you could buy that was tangible. We didn't buy services, that was another division. And then went to Los Angeles, where I was involved in buying a constellation of satellites that today circle the globe, looking for the launch of missiles by the heat signature that comes from the exhaust of the missile. Went to the Pentagon and did policy work in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, setting policy for the entire DoD acquisition workforce, and addressed issues, technology transition, intellectual property, how to buy with the government credit card, a variety of other things. Went to Afghanistan and was in charge of procurement and the entire theater there from Uzbekistan through Afghanistan and in the Horn of Africa. When I retired, I decided that that was a good place to be in Washington, and the work I've done has kind of followed me. So I keep doing that work and helping clients understand the federal procurement process, the rules, the nuances. I've been in the business for about, I guess, 30 years now. So that's kind of my background. Touch on other things as we go along. And Jeanette, how are we set up now?
So everything's fine. Everyone can unmute their phone
Oh,
and
good.
cameras, so we're good. And you can go ahead and share your screen when you're ready.
Okay, so I wasn't sure. Okay, I'll bring that up. I've got a slide presentation that I will walk through, and it's my preference that if anybody has questions as we're going along, feel free to ask. It doesn't make sense to me to save questions until the end, because at that point you might have forgot, or it's lost its import. So feel free to ask questions, and I will bring it up here momentarily. And I'll put it in presentation mode. Okay, everybody see my screen, I hope?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. And everybody can hear me, I hope. So this is an overview. At the onset, I would tell you that, and I can touch on it a little bit more, in order to do the work that I did when I was in uniform, or that the people that are spending your tax dollars today are doing when it comes to government procurement, they have to be certified, trained and certified in accordance with the Defense Acquisition Workforce Improvement Act. DIWEA, just to give you an idea, is kind of akin to being a CPA. You have to do a lot of training, you have to be certified, test, and you're given a certificate that says you're sufficiently trained to do this work. The Contracting 101 for level 1 certification is a 8-week, 80-hour course. Then there's contract pricing and contract law. So what we'll present today in the space of 1 hour is really touching at the surface of a couple of different areas. So Again, this is not meant to be something that makes anybody an expert. It's really to help you understand some of the basics. Um, the marketplace in the federal for the federal government is competitive, and there are companies of all sizes that are looking to sell their goods and services. And so, if you're interested in doing this work, this presentation is designed to really give you an overview at the maybe 50,000 foot level so that you understand kind of the things that you need to be thinking about. Um, all right. So, synopsis understanding. We're going to touch on readiness for entering the federal marketplace, the rules and regulations, the roles and responsibilities of the players in the procurement process. Again, please ask questions as we go along. And here we go. So one of the first things that I encourage my clients to do is understand their readiness to do business with the federal government. And a lot of companies think, well, I've got this product, I've got this service, and I just want to sell. It takes more than that. There are a lot of questions that I think you should ask yourself about your readiness with regard to working with the federal government. And it's not just registering with the system for acquisition management and making sure that you have those things figured out. It is oftentimes internal. So, for instance, does your business have a reliable revenue stream? Can you afford to commit resources to doing this? If you are putting all your eggs in one basket and thinking that the government procurement process is where you're going to make your business successful, and that's the only thing you're going to do, you might be in for a rude awakening unless you have really deep pockets or a revenue stream available to you that will allow you to go from crawling to walking to running. The procurement process in the federal government can often take for a single procurement 3 months, 6 months, 18 months, depending on the size and what is being procured. And if you don't have the wherewithal to keep the lights on and the doors open in that intervening time, maybe you should be thinking about how do you do that. Um, um, there are a lot of products out there that the government buys, both commercial and government specific. Just because it's a better mousetrap doesn't mean that the government needs the better mousetrap when the mousetraps they have work just fine. The government has a lot of inventory of material things, and thinking that just because yours is better today doesn't mean that they can simply buy that because they haven't used up all the other stuff that they've got in inventory. Um, does it make sense to start small or swing for the fences? Are there risks that you have to mitigate? What's your strategy for going about entering the government market? The last bullet there, and I've got a couple more slides with some of these kinds of questions. Um, are you looking to be a prime contractor that does work directly with the government? Or might it make sense to be a subcontractor to a prime, a larger company that is looking for putting a team together? Operating as a small or disadvantaged business might be something that you want to consider. Women-owned, veteran-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned. There are a lot of considerations along those lines that you will also want to think about. Typically, when I work with a new client, I have three categories of criteria that I help walk them through: technical readiness, business readiness, and managerial readiness. And these questions and the ones on the next two slides highlight some of the areas that I would discuss in those three broader areas of, again, technical readiness, business readiness, and managerial readiness. Any questions before I move on? Okay. So discussing the previous slide, I mentioned pros and cons of prime versus sub. Um, the second one is kind of important, and I alluded to that a few minutes ago. Do you fully understand how long it takes the federal government uh, to process a payment when an invoice is submitted, or to make an award of a contract once a solicitation has been released for bid? I mentioned that it can be 18 months or longer. If you're paying attention to the news right now and you've seen that, um, we just avoided a government shutdown because the House and Senate were able to pass a stopgap appropriations bill. Let's call it a continuing resolution. Um, that can factor into what an effect to your business. Until they pass a new appropriation, they can't award any new contracts at all. And I have seen um, this kind of stalemate drag way past the new year into March and April. And until a new appropriations bill is put out, they can't do anything but continue existing contracts. They can't um, award new contracts because they don't have any new money. So understanding these kinds of issues is important because you need to know whether or not your business can operate within those norms. Business reputation is really important. Do you have a demonstrated past performance that you can cite in proposals that you're interested in pursuing? Um, most companies do, but there are some companies where it's new. It's a new technology. They don't have any. So how do you demonstrate that the government can trust that if it makes an award to you, they are going to be receiving the products or services that they've awarded a contract for? They have to have confidence that that's going to happen. Um, I come from the DoD world. I still have a top secret SCI clearance. So there are a lot of contracts out there that security clearances are required. Is that the kind of work that you're going to be involved in? Do you have the security clearance considerations addressed? Do you need to have a SCIF, secure compartmented room where you can have classified discussions? Does somebody manage your security process? Um, those are all very important things if that kind of work is something that you're going to be pursuing. And lastly, on this page is your accounting system. Depending on the contract dollar value, the contract might have to be audited by the government at some point. They're going to want to look at your books. Is that something you're comfortable with? If you have a DCAA, a Defense Contract Audit Agency compliant accounting system, it shouldn't be a problem. If your accounting system is an Excel spreadsheet, you might want to think twice about how you pursue that work. And maybe one of the first things you have to do is figure out how to make use of QuickBooks so that you can be compliant. a variety of ways to do that, but your accounting system, depending again on the dollar value and the types of contracts that you're looking to pursue, will dictate a consideration that you have to address at some point. Any questions on this slide? Okay. Last in this group. That didn't go forward. Okay, there we go. Business goals, strategies, culture. The government can be sometimes a little stuffy. You know, in the DoD, coats and ties are often appropriate when you go to a meeting with a DoD contracting office. And I've had some clients that they want to wear their polo shirts and jeans. Right? That is maybe not the right way to present yourself to a prospective client. So understanding the culture, understanding the issues that comprise goals and strategies for working in the federal marketplace are important. You know, a lot of companies have a product or service that's very similar from somebody else. How do you set yourself apart from your competition? If it's only on price, then you have to really understand what your threshold is for how low you can bid, because if it's full and open competition, and the government's going to award to the lowest priced, technically acceptable bid, you need to make sure you understand how that affects what your business does in the future. Does the business adhere to manufacturing or performance standards? The government will often call out what you may have heard in the past as military specs, mil specs, or other performance standards that are out there in the marketplace. And if you can't perform to those standards, then you will be at a disadvantage. How do you make your business bring them up to speed so that you can perform to those standards? How long will that take? Those are the kinds of things that you will want to consider before stepping into the marketplace. Industry-related trade associations. There are a number of them, and sometimes it can be advantageous to belong and be participating in those. Some are standards bodies, and you can be intimately involved with the development of the standard. Others aren't standards bodies, but they represent the industry as a whole. The National Defense Industries Association, the Aerospace Industries Association, on and on. There are many, and allows you to more deeply understand the issues and concerns that the government has in their future procurements, the problems that they're wrestling with and need to address. So that's something that might be of value. Credentials, I mentioned earlier that from my standpoint, I had to be credentialed. Well, some contracts call for individuals that must be credentialed. If you're doing corrosion mitigation on a weapon system, and they want to make sure that you're certified to do the blasting and painting on that tank, truck, ship, do you have the credentials that show that you are qualified to go and do that? Lastly, how are you going to go and find the work that you want to bid on and deliver that work if you win the contract? If you think that the CEO of the company can do this all by themselves, that's probably not a great idea. It is a different world with oftentimes its own unique language. It sounds like English, but you need to make sure you understand what that word means to the government, because it might be slightly different than in the commercial marketplace. So having somebody with a rose pinned on them that can and is responsible for um, following government procurement issues, seeking opportunities, putting proposals together to do that work is actually very important. So those three slides at a high level point to a litany of issues that touch on business, technical, and managerial readiness that any contractor, any vendor should consider and be aware of before entering the federal procurement marketplace. So, any other questions? Any questions? Resounding silence. Okay, go to the next slide. What in the world? All right. Jeanette, are you going to provide these slides for folks later?
Yes, I sure can.
Yeah, I have no problem with that at all. So I've always been a fan of the Sunday comics, and you will find invariably at times that they have references to government procurement, and the Wizard of Oz and Dilbert and others do that. And there's always, well, if somewhat amusing, a grain of truth in this kind of thing. So I include it just for a little bit of brevity and levity. So the second area that we'll talk about are federal procurement governance, the rules and regulations. Procurement in the federal space is very open. It is very accessible. It is governed by law. And they define how the process works. Who does what? We'll talk about the PM versus the CO here in a minute. How that process gets done is all derived from these rules and regulations. The biggest and most important for anybody to understand is the federal acquisition regulation. It is federal law. It's broken into 52 parts, and you can access it there at that hyperlink when you get this presentation delivered in your inbox. The FAR, as it's referred to, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, does not tell people what to buy. It doesn't tell the government contracting officer or program manager what to buy. It specifies how procurement is to be done. The various types of contracts, the rules and regulations for preference to a small business versus a full and open competition. All what the FAR does is describe how, again, how procurement in the federal marketplace is to be done. At a level below the FAR, every federal agency has a supplement. In this case, in parentheses, you'll see the DFARS, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. There is a supplement for the Department of Homeland Security. There is a supplement for every federal agency. Pick one: Department of State, Department of Justice. And then even below that, there are often supplements that go one step further. So below the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, the Air Force has its own supplement to the DFARS. And they spell out unique requirements that reflect agency policy. So understanding that the FAR is the highest level, that there are supplements, they all describe how procurement in the federal marketplace is to be done. And a lot of it stems from what was codified in the Competition and Contract Act, 1984. Subpart 6.1 of the FAR describes what's called full and open competition. There are other ways to have a contract awarded, sole source. There's a whole variety of different types of contracts, from cost plus to firm fixed price to indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, GSA schedules. All of those things are covered in the Federal Acquisition Regulation and its supplements. It's important to understand that because just like playing a board game like Monopoly, if you understand the rules and you understand the process, you can be more successful in playing the game. If you don't, all you do is hamstring yourself. You don't have to be an expert, but you do need to understand that these rules are there and available for you to use. So I touched on the FAR. There are federal acquisition circulars that touch on issues that are pertinent at the time. There might be an issue that's come up that is in a FAQ that you might want to be particularly attuned to because it affects your special business and what you do. Touched on the DFARS, the Army Federal Supplement. There are other documents out there that add additional levels of rule and regulation, such as the architect engineering contracting at the Army Corps of Engineers, EP 715-1-7. If you're doing work with the Corps of Engineers, you probably want to be familiar with those two examples. Procurement instruction letters, those are out there. Those last 2, 3 might not be as common, but depending on the work you do and the clients that you're looking to do work with, you should certainly be aware of those. So here's some key parts of the Federal Acquisition Regulation that I would point people to. Subpart 8.4, Federal Supply Schedules. I mentioned the GSA schedules. People are often familiar with those. Part 13, 14, 15, 16, and 19 all describe those things you see on the screen. They go into great detail about simplified acquisition or sealed bidding, contracting by negotiation, the different types of contracts. A very simple commercial product might be always going to be a firm fixed price contract. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a contract that when you bid that, you deliver the product, the price is agreed, and that's what the government pays. A cost plus contract might be is very different. The government pays your costs and you get profit by how much fee is associated with that. It might be award fee, it might be a fixed fee, an incentive fee. There are a variety of types of contracts that are all spelled out in Part 16. And then small business programs. The government wants to incentivize small businesses to be successful and participatory in the government procurement process. These programs exist to drive that. Big companies like Boeing, Honeywell, Raytheon, they are incentivized to do a certain percentage of business with small vendors. And Part 19 spells out those programs that drive that. And again, if you're a small business, you probably want to make sure that you are familiar with and take advantage of the provisions there for you, because they're designed exactly for that purpose, to give you an advantage over a Boeing or a Raytheon or a Honeywell. Any questions before I move on? Okay, Dilbert. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. If you're reading, I'll give you a minute. And if you've read that, it goes to what I'm going to cover here next. Who are the players? Roles and responsibilities. As you enter the federal procurement marketplace, there are really two groups of people that you want to be cognizant of and aware of. You have people that are involved in the program and people that are involved in contracting. They are not the same. And I'll go a little bit more detail in the coming slides, but somebody that is in the program world has a requirement, a need to buy something. They need a desk, they need a tank, they need an airplane that's going to fly and drop bombs. That is a requirement, a need. They also have funding and the responsibility for John, for expending those funds. But importantly, they have no legal authority to go to a vendor and say, I need this desk, here's my money, and bring it to my office. That falls in the contracting space. Conversely, they don't have a requirement and they have no funding. They are responsible for negotiating and issuing contracts. And importantly, at the very last bullet, is the only legal authority to direct a contractor. So when I was in uniform as a contracting officer, I fit into the column on the right side. People on the left side would come to me and say, Colonel, I have this requirement. I filled out these forms. Here's my fund site. Can you buy this for me? And then I would go through the process. My staff and I would make sure that everything that they presented was correct, that we put a solicitation out on the street, that we received proposals, that we evaluated proposals. I worked with the program office to make sure that all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed. But I was the only one that had the legal authority to issue the contract. So we'll go into a little more detail on the next slide. So one of the most important people that you will at some point want to get to know is referred to often as a program manager, a PM. They identify the need for the supplies or service, the requirement that they are responsible for. They define all the technical and schedule issues around that. They will be responsible for developing the statement of work, sometimes also referred to as performance work statement. You'll see other terms such as a statement of objective, all slightly different, but those documents define the scope that is going to be put on contract. We're working tandem with the contracting officer to prepare and submit procurement requests. They are responsible for finding funding. And then in the end, if contract's awarded, they're the ones that are going to say, yep, the contractor delivered what was expected. They've done an inspection, they've accepted, they've signed off on the invoice, sent that to the contracting officer. Contracting officer tells finance, go and pay this invoice. That's the scope of a program manager's responsibilities at a high level. So if you're looking to develop business relationships, a program manager is a pretty important person to try and get to know and understand what their pain and suffering is so that you can help address that. Contracting officer, on the other hand, is the only person that can legally authorize the government in a contract. And they will have in their warrant, you actually have what is called a warrant, different levels of authority. My warrant was unlimited. At one point, it meant that I could obligate the government and sign a contract to any dollar value. I managed a program in Los Angeles that it was a $3.5 billion program, contract to Lockheed Martin. Other contracting officers have limits that are far smaller, maybe $1 million, maybe 2, maybe 10, but they can sign to that warrant level. A program manager can't sign a contract. So only the contracting officer can obligate the government, change delivery dates, issue stop work orders, modify a contract, or in general, give a vendor direction. A program manager can't do that because if the program manager gives you direction and you now have expended effort and want to invoice for that direction that was given, and it's not on contract, you might not get paid for that. And so you want to be very cognizant of the different responsibilities that a program manager has from a contracting officer. And the other term that you'll see from time to time is a contracting officer representative, a core. That is an individual that has delegated responsibilities from a contracting officer to do administrative, non-technical things with a contract once it's been awarded. They might be reviewing invoices and bills for accuracy, doing inspection of delivered supplies or services, those kinds of things that are administrative, not technical. And they usually don't have the authority to direct the vendor. So those are the three individuals that you should be aware of as you look to enter into the federal procurement marketplace. Having a relationship with a contracting officer is not a bad thing, but knowing the program manager and the contracting officer that you'd be dealing with is important. There are other procurement players. The higher contracting authority is at the high level, the individual that gives signs the warrants and says that Greg was allowed to go and is qualified to sign contracts on behalf of the government. And there are certainly attorneys involved, depending on the size of the contract. They get involved in reviewing specific issues. Budget analysts, subject matter experts, cost and price analysts that develop cost estimating, and Defense Contract Audit Agency, as I mentioned earlier, as auditors. They might be reviewing your books to look at your rates and how you've allocated costs in your accounting system. So these are the other procurement players that you might bump into as you work into the federal procurement marketplace. Any questions? Okay. When I did training early on, instructors stand at the front of the room and stomp their feet, and there were things that they wanted to make sure you understood because it was going to be on the test. So repeat it here. Only warranted contracting officers have the authority to let contracts. And even though that is taught to every person in the acquisition workforce, certainly in the DoD, you would be amazed at how often somebody goes and does something because they were told to, They submit an invoice and are told, nope, we can't pay this invoice because the work you did is not on contract. But they told me to. That doesn't work that way. Unauthorized commitments are not binding because that person lacked the authority to issue direction on behalf of the government. So that's the foot stomp here on this slide. Don't let yourself get sucked into doing something because you thought somebody had authority. Make sure they do, and make sure it's in writing. So takeaways, we're bumping into 45 minutes, and a few minutes to questions and discussion. Be familiar with the federal government contracting process. Ensure you have the right expertise to do the work you want to do. Have a good look at your business, technical, and managerial readiness to enter the federal marketplace. Understand the rules that govern the federal procurement process. You don't have to be an expert, but you need to understand them. And if you have a contract that you're going to sign, make sure you've read the entire thing. A lot of the rules will be included only by reference and not in full text. So you need to make sure that you understand what you are signing yourself up for before you do it. And then lastly, know the players. Understand who the program manager is, the contracting officer, what they can and can't do, and try and develop relationships that might be helpful to ensuring your success in that space. This is the high level. This presentation was meant to be one of the 3 or 4. The next would go into other areas. So with that, I am open to questions. Anybody have any questions that you'd like to ask? Everybody's shy. It's Tuesday morning. Okay, John Hagwood, I know you're there. You've got a question. Put you on the spot.
Greg, you wouldn't dare put me on the spot like that, would you?
I just did.
Good morning, folks. Greg, tremendous job sharing with the team. Very high level, kind of what's required. One of the areas, Greg, I was hopeful you might could just spend a moment as well, because in some cases we engage with smaller manufacturers, sometimes smaller machine shops. And quite honestly, Greg, sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming as you try to engage and go through.
Right.
Could you just spend a few moments at a very high level talking about the assessment that is available to kind of give, again, let's say a smaller, maybe smaller, medium-sized manufacturer, a good idea of how they rank based on your many years of expertise and working on the federal procurement side? Could you just spend a few minutes just talking about the assessment that's available?
Sure. So what John is alluding to is that, for GenEdge and with GenEdge, I've developed an assessment tool that I use to dive really deep into the 3 areas of business, technical, and managerial readiness with a contractor, vendor, prospective vendor that wants to enter the marketplace. I will want to understand the company and the people in the company and the technology that the company has, be it a product or service. And the assessment is designed to pull out a detail that then I can sit back and review and score and provide a numerical score that says, you're really ready to do this, or you're not so ready, or or the areas that you have to pay particular attention to. So just as an example, because I know it's something John has talked about before, as we move forward in this day and age, um, the government is looking to make sure that vendors have a secure electronic system that they deal with, because everything's electronic. And that is something that some companies have a better handle on than others. And depending on where you sit, um, might be scored lower or scored higher because you've already addressed it. I mentioned early on security clearances. Well, if the work you're looking to do requires a security clearance and you don't have anybody that's got a security clearance, that's going to be scored lower. So there's about 26 specific questions, topics that I touch on in the assessment, broken into those three areas. I sit with the clients and provide feedback after I've had a chance to digest it all. And it's something that I think is important for any contractor looking to walk into the space that they've never been in before. Is that kind of what you were thinking about, John?
Perfectly said, Greg. Really appreciate you taking time to try to make that a little more clear. Yes.
Yep. Anybody else?
Hi, Greg. It looks like from the chat, everyone is saying that you've answered their questions and really appreciate the extremely informative presentation that you gave.
Okay.
And so it looks like somebody might be typing, but while they're getting their thoughts together, you did state that this slide will be available to everyone on the call today.
Sure. I have no qualm if you want to share it with them.
Okay.
Yeah, feel free. Um, I'll add at the end here. There are a lot of uh, businesses that are out there that are more than happy to take your money and say, we will help you get in the federal marketplace, and we'll get your business registered, and we'll do this and that and the other thing. I don't recognize Ariel and Buzz or Doug, John and Dean Young, who were on from GenEdge. If you're approached and think that you have to spend money to register in the system for acquisition management, um, somebody's trying to take money from you that you don't need to give them. It's all free. You don't have to do that. So at a high level, part of what we're trying to do here is make sure you understand so that you're more informed going forward. Happy to answer questions. Let's see if there's something in this chat.
All right, looks like Doug, are you? Oh, okay. I thought he was unmuting himself to ask a question.
Yeah, I was. Sorry about that.
Oh,
Greg,
Yes.
Thank you for everything. I had a question. I'm a
Sure.
prime contract on one contract, and it was awarded on February 4th on 2021.
Okay.
And of course, we had 8 auditors out here go through our ISO certs and everything, and said everything passed with flying colors. But the guy that was here said in 43 years, it was the worst contract he's ever seen written. We are still dealing with first articles on this. I mean, I can email people, and it goes sometimes 5-6 months before I get a response. I've tried everything. I keep getting emails from the government saying they need it for the Ukraine conflict, but yet the ball's in their court. I just didn't know if this was something, because it's really, I don't know, kind of a deterrent to how much I'm really going to do with the government, because this is my first one. You know, I've subbed plenty, but it's really got a bad taste in my mouth, because, you know, when I do get a response from them, they demand something within 36 hours, and then it's 6 months before I hear from them. So I didn't know if this was just something that's out of the ordinary, because he did warn me. He said that, and there is another one that they have not awarded that I bid on, same NSN number. And he said that it's literally going to be copy and pasted. So everything that we go up against with this poorly written contract will be in the new one, because it won't be fixed.
Yeah. So yeah, Doug, I'm happy to address that. And so first off, I'll say that it is disappointing to me professionally when I see that happening now in my retired capacity. It galled me when I was in uniform, but the neat thing about being in uniform is that I could do something about it, because at my rank, I can tell people what to do. The unfortunate part is, and what I just heard you describe, is that you have bumped into people that don't take their job as seriously, or are not as professional, or not as well trained as we would like them to be, because they're spending your tax dollars. And it's a reality that people need to understand. Not everybody is as well trained as you would like them to be. I always advise my clients to know as much or more, if possible, than the people that you're dealing with in the government. There are ways to address that. So if you've had auditors looking at you, I don't know the specifics of your contract or how much, but you might have a DCMA, Defense Contract Management Agency, contact that you can work with. There are other avenues to try and get that ball moving. It does happen. It is frustrating. It is wrong. And I've also can tell you that there are individuals out there that take their job extraordinarily seriously, and they are extraordinarily responsive. And you would not, you run into them and you think, you can't be a government employee. Well, yeah, there are those out there. It's you just happen to bump into and be dealing with somebody that is not as professional and competent as they should be.
Okay. Yeah. The DCMA guy, I know he works from home, and my email will fall on deaf ears for maybe 5-6 weeks and then get a response. Oh, I missed, the excuse of I misplaced this email is getting old,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Yeah, Doug, I was a DCMA commander, right? I had 80 people working for me in my last duty assignment. Northern New Jersey. My office was in a Honeywell facility. I had people in Lockheed Martin, Boeing, 5 different industry companies in the Northern New Jersey area. And there is somebody there that will yank on his chain, but you have to be able to figure out who that is.
Who that is, yeah. Yeah, I had one lady she was great. She said it had fallen on her desk, and then she extended the first articles out the 32 days that it was misplaced. But she has come and gone and is no longer in that position, and now it's just right back to where it was before she started. So
yeah. The other thing I'd mentioned, Doug, that you highlighted is the cut and paste. Anybody entering in the federal marketplace needs to understand that the people that are doing this work are often inundated, absolutely inundated. And so what they do is say, well, it worked on the last contract. I'm just going to cut and paste everything and put it in this one. Even though there are differences and they need to go and make changes and tweaks that are appropriate for that new procurement, they fail to do that. So when you see a solicitation, and there are things that don't make sense, the onus of responsibility is on you to say, hey, wait a second, and ask questions. Because otherwise you get stuck with a crappy contract that, like you said, the guy said it's the worst he's ever seen in 46 years. Yep, I've seen those too.
Yeah. We've pretty much ironed it out. We're just waiting. I mean, they said it's inspected, the first articles, they just haven't approved them yet.
Right.
But he was just warning me, because once they seen me bid on this one,
Right.
they pushed the next contract over into a hub zone because I am a hub zone contractor.
Sure.
So he was just warning me, hey, you might want to hold on to all your emails, and because it's just going to be redundant for the next one.
Right.
So,
yep. On behalf of people that take their job seriously, I apologize and wish that you didn't have to deal with that.
Yeah. Well,
but you're not the only one.
But yeah. Okay.
Ariel, Buzz, if you have any questions, happy to address them. All right, Jeanette, feel free to share this with everyone, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your Tuesday.
All right, I appreciate it, Greg. Hey, one last question for you, Greg.
Sure.
Subcontracting for, I've subcontracted for the people who work for Lockheed Martin, and how other than the supplier forms that you fill out, what would you recommend doing to get on their radar as a, a woman-owned hub zone manufacturer who, when I go to the DLAs and stuff like that, I mean, they classify you as a unicorn because there's not that much manufacturing going on in the hub zone, but yet it just seems like I'm not grabbing the attention in the right way. So I didn't know if you knew of any.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in some of the future presentations, but at a high level, Doug, right now, what I would tell you is that one of the things, in the interest of time, I'll try and be brief, but you need to get to know the representatives at the Lockheed Martin that you would be dealing with at a trade show, at an industry day opportunity, at Langley Air Force Base. They're going to do a procurement, or at Wright-Patterson, and to talk to them face to face is one of the most important things that you can do. The electronic job boards and things that you can register with are important to do, but it really does require some wear of shoe leather and gripping and grinning to make sure they understand what your capabilities are and why they want to make sure that they have involved you in their procurements as a subcontractor. And there's a variety of techniques that you can leverage to make sure that they see you for the capable vendor that you are and want to be received as.
Okay.
All right. That helps.
Yes. Yep. Thank you, Greg.
Again, I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and look forward to next presentation, Jeanette.
Absolutely, and I will let everybody know when that will be. So
okay.
Thank you so much, Greg, for your time. Very informative.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.